Sziasztok! The Hungarian Heritage Podcast is back for Season 3, and we are Hungarian Heritage Stronger Than Ever. For those of you who have been here a while, welcome back, and thanks so much for sticking around. And for those of you who are new to the podcast, welcome! I'm so happy that you're joining us. My name is Christine, and I'm the host here at the Hungarian Heritage Podcast. During Season 3, I will continue to bring you guests and topics that celebrate Hungarian culture, people, and food. And of course, we will feature all of the cool things that Hungarians are doing around the world. Together, we will discover new things and review things that you may already know. And most of all, we will have a lot of fun along the way. One episode at a time, we will build those bridges between Hungarians who live in Hungary to those who live in other parts of the world. Not to mention the bridges we will build between the generations. So, if you're looking to make that first connection to your Hungarian heritage, or you're looking to strengthen your connection, then you found the right place. Join me, and together we will connect your modern lives to your Hungarian heritage by expanding this Hungarian heritage community and making the circles of Hungarians around us Hungarian heritage strong. Welcome back to part 2 of our interview with Kati Csoman, along with my co-host, Dr. Anna Fenyvesi, in our series of Celebrating Hungarian Heritage Together. If you haven't listened to part 1 of Kati's family story, where she talks about her dad, Endre's emigration to the United States and his contributions to the American Hungarian community, you can certainly do that either before or after you listen to this episode. You will still be able to appreciate the Csoman family story regardless of which order you listen. In this episode, we are picking up where we left off with the Csoman Family Legacy, where you will hear all about Kati's American Hungarian experiences as a firstborn American Hungarian of immigrants and her continued contributions to the American Hungarian legacy. You will certainly feel the Hungarian connection when listening to Kati's story, and you will realize that you are not alone in your Hungarian heritage journey. Listen along as we celebrate Hungarian heritage together. We're going to move into a little bit of your Hungarian heritage experience now, which I'm going to let Anna start asking the questions for that one, because we didn't mention this before, but Kati and Anna met well before this Hungarian Roots and American Dreams book. Anna, why don't you start off asking Kati the questions regarding that portion of her American Hungarian life?
Yes, so actually, Kati and I met, I think, in the late summer of 1991, just a few weeks after I arrived in Pittsburgh as a graduate student in the linguistics department. And Kati was a fellow student in a different program at Pitt. And as a graduate student, I had a teaching assistantship where I was teaching in the Language Acquisition Institute. And one of the languages, this was the small unit that taught the smaller languages, uncommonly taught languages that did not have their own departments at the University of Pittsburgh. And one of these languages was Hungarian. And it was through this unit that I somehow met Kati. And we became instant friends, as I remember. And it was through Kati that I started going to these American Hungarian events, various dinners and dances. And that was a very, very fascinating, interesting social scene for me. And also at the time, there were other international students from Hungary. And pretty soon we formed this Magyar Kör, Hungarian circle. And we sometimes went on these trips to various American Hungarian events, and we did even more socializing and partying, as I remember, big chicken paprikás cookouts and discussions well into the night over wine and the kind of things that graduate students do.
Yeah, so did you ever attend the Hungarian Festival in New Brunswick, New Jersey with Kati? Did you ever make it out to New Jersey? No,
I didn't.
Well, next time you come to the U.S., you'll have to make sure you coordinate your trip for the first weekend of June.
Okay.
Because,
First weekend of June.
First weekend of June. So you never have to know the date. You
Right.
just have to know it's the first Saturday of June every year. So I imagine that I don't even have to imagine. You were greatly influenced by your parents and the community that you grew up in, Kati. So you attended the University of Pittsburgh, and you had more Hungarian opportunities there.
Yeah,
Uh,
and so right, I went off to a liberal arts school my first year because I thought I wanted to study archaeology, and I did.
okay.
But I didn't have good mentorship, and so I didn't know what you do to become an archaeologist. And
Right.
it wasn't a good social experience for me at that school, even though I was doing really well academically and I was involved in a lot of things. But the social scene was not a fun scene. It was mostly frats and sororities, and that just
Right.
wasn't my thing. So I transferred to Pitt and I had a really tremendous undergraduate mentor. His name is Dr. Bob Donnarumma, and he was the associate director of the Center for Russian and East European Studies, and immediately recognized or, took note of my Hungarian background. So he encouraged me to apply for a scholarship through the nationality rooms and intercultural exchange programs. It was actually through the Hungarian Room Committee, and I'll talk a little bit about the NRIEP in a minute. But that led me just on a path that really took me a whole different direction. So I got the scholarship. I was able to study abroad in Hungary in that summer. I think it was 1987 or 88, one of 1987. And that's when I met my family in Heves Megye for the first time. So I went first to
Mhm.
Heves Megye, literally woke up my first morning with my cousin Yoshka. So this would be my dad's cousin's son, sitting on the bed next to me. And it was the kind of bed that like pulls out like a
Hmm.
1980s kind of
Yeah, I
Hungarian,
think it was like like a trundle
like
situation.
a
Yeah, yeah,
trundle
yeah,
bed.
yeah.
Yeah. But Yoshka is going through my makeup bag, looking at things. And so I lived with Yoshka and Shusha, but I spent a lot of time with my dad's cousin, Margit Nini, who lived down the road. And just, that was like a whole month. Then I went down to, at the time, it was János Pannonius University in Pécs. Now it's the University of Pécs. And I spent a month there, learned Hungarian language, studied culture, politics. Then I came back for another month in the village. And so through that time, I really got to experience, well, first, I think developed a little bit of a strange accent in Hungarian because that's the Palots region. And,
Yeah.
there certainly is a dialect that I think impacted the way I pronounce vowels and other usage of the language.
Mhm.
But really got to know the village, really got to know my relatives and, really became to love them so much and got very close with them, even though it was only 3 months. But then came back to Pitt, continued to study Hungarian in the less commonly taught languages program, had wonderful instructor of Hungarian. And then it kind of put me on the pathway of incorporating international education into my field of study. And because of getting a certificate in Russian and East European studies with a focus on Hungary and Hungarian language, I received a fellowship when I graduated through the US Department of State to go and work at the American Embassy in Budapest. Interestingly, the first year, there were 10 fellows chosen among something like 400 something applications. But nobody went because of security clearances. So at the time, the
Right.
reason the fellowship was established was to give people who could speak these languages high-level security clearances to work in the embassy in Russia and East Europe. And at any rate, it took us a year. And I say us because I ended up going with another American Hungarian. Her name is Jutka Yokai of the Yokai Moore family. And so Jutka and I were assigned to the American Embassy in Budapest. And so we lived there together for 14 months. We lived right across the street from the Fisherman's Bastion and the
Yeah.
amazing building on Szent Áramság tér on the Trinity Square. And we had an amazing life. The embassy really didn't know what to do with us. The Hungarians were confused because, especially in Yutka's case, she had perfect Hungarian.
Yeah.
Me, not so much, never ever, but still, I tried. And the Americans didn't know what to do with us because we weren't foreign service officers. And so, it took us time to settle in, but essentially, I was able to work in each part of the embassy. I worked in the consular affairs. I worked twice in the political section. I worked in the press and information section. And I did really interesting things. And then Yutka and I would spend our weeks. We would get the Pesti Mushor, which would tell us all the cultural events and concerts. And so we would circle what we would do if it was going to the cinema to watch an old movie. I love Cara di Catalin movies, or, going to the opera or whatever. Initially, I could not see my relatives because otherwise it would require this reporting to the regional security officer. But after October, so this was 1990, so it was right after the fall of communism. And that year, in October 90, the U.S. Department of State dropped the non-fraternization policy for employees in the embassy in Hungary. And so that meant that I could travel freely within Hungary, visit people. I wouldn't have to report that to the US government. And so then I started going every weekend to the village, would take a bus, like a lot of people who lived in Budapest,
Yeah.
and, go every weekend. So I had this really, interesting lifestyle of living in a really nice apartment, doing all the embassy things during the week, and receptions, and going to cinema and theater and concerts, and then on the weekend just helping to clean the floors in Zsuzsa's house, or helping. I mean, I did learn a lot about cooking, and I spent a lot of time with Margaret Naney during that year, and just living, which I find interesting now, because at least in the United States, but I think around the world, there's this movement to return to a simpler lifestyle, baking bread and, having gardens and all of that. And I find that interesting because it feels comfortable to me. It feels natural to me from growing up, spending time in the village. Yeah.
That's a good point, because those topics are they're very topical on social media. Everybody's baking bread. Everybody is, making gardens now, which is very normal.
Yeah. 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 It's normal, I would say. And it's also like sort of, the admirable, or people aspire to be traditional, if you will.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I think you probably realized that you were working at the U.S. Embassy in Hungary at a very pivotal point in history.
Absolutely.
Which I guess, that was a very lucky time for you to experience that, through your lens as an American, especially not being able to, visit your family until those regulations were eased during that time period. So I'm sure you could write a whole book on just that alone.
Yeah, I mean, it was, definitely interesting in terms of the rule of law, developing democracy, opposition parties, all of that. So.
Of course. So you were going to tell us a little bit more about the nationality rooms, and you already discussed a little bit about the nationality rooms intercultural exchange program, because you were part of that, but you're actually the director of all that now.
Yeah.
I'm sure that your family is so proud, that I feel like your parents' efforts have brought you to this position.
It's true, Christine. No, I feel that way very much. I feel like this is the job I was meant to do. So the program was established nearly 100 years ago in the 1920s at the University of Pittsburgh. And I'll try to be brief, but it's hard to not describe the program in full. But essentially, when they were building this lovely building, and if you haven't visited, I invite you to visit the Cathedral of Learning, which is 40-something stories high, and Anna had her department there for many years. It's a beautiful Gothic style building. But when that was being built, the chancellor at the time, John Bowman, decided to build from the top down. And so there were several floors that were incomplete. It was just the structure of the building. And there was a woman, Ruth Crawford Mitchell, who was a sociologist, who had already been working with second generation students, so students whose families were immigrants. And she was actually doing nativity studies, so learning about these immigrant families. And it is she who inspired John Bowman to reach out to ethnic communities to build classrooms. So there are 30 nationality and heritage rooms that were fully funded by ethnic communities. I think the first group were 6 or 8. I should know this better, this history. But there's correspondence between Ruth Crawford Mitchell and John Bowman to talk about the concept of nationality rooms at the time, which then evolved into nationality and heritage rooms. But they reached out to initial communities who fully fundraised to build these classrooms, design them, decide themselves. And among those first classrooms was the Hungarian room, or is the Hungarian room. The mission of the program, this is a mission newly developed or newly stated, I guess, since I began my directorship, is sharing stories of regional ethnic communities, past and present, through inspirational spaces and intercultural experiences. So the program began with these classrooms, and they were built. So the first fundraising began in the 1920s, 1926, but the actual first classrooms were built in the late 1930s. Remarkable when you think about the Hungarian American community, mostly steelworkers, coal miners, bringing together the money to do this, and being led by, leaders in their social organizations and their churches.
Such as your parents.
Yeah.
Definitely give a nod to your parents, because that's similar to, I imagine, the programs that were donating to these in the early stages. Right.
Right. Fraternal Benefit Society were very crucial for this. And so the classrooms were built from the 1930s. The most recent classroom, which was built in 2016, I may get that wrong, but it is the Philippine classroom. So Ruth Crawford Mitchell, she was the director for nearly 50 years. She did take time off to do war reconstruction with the International Red Cross in Cairo during World War II. She came back to Pitt, and she actually established the first Intercultural Exchanges Board. So that's the second part of our mission.
Right.
And really, it was the first international office for the university. And Ruth Crawford Mitchell, what happened is when the classrooms were built, there was money left over that was shifted to provide scholarships for students to go to these countries and learn, as Anna said earlier, learn about their heritage. That was sort of the first kind of iteration of these scholarships. This exploration of heritage, language, culture. But then the program, through Ruth Crawford Mitchell's efforts, and then the second director, E. Maxine Bruns, it expanded to include scholarships that weren't associated with room committees, but, send students anywhere in the world, or, have a specific purpose in mind, or are set up for students of Czech and Slovak heritage, for example. So we have a program of about 70-something scholarships at both the undergraduate and graduate level. Last year, we gave out $271,000 to 131 students, something like that, or 118 students. I should know these things off the top of my head. But at any rate, it's significant in terms of the amount of funding support that we give students for global learning experiences in the summer. Some are region or country specific because they're associated with a room committee, or, have a history with a room committee, and others are non-location specific. And so the program is about the rooms, and we do a lot of public education tours. It's about committees that are associated with the rooms, and I was involved as a volunteer with the Hungarian Room Committee for about 15 years. So you offer cultural programming, you kind of keep this connection between, it really is this connection between local and global. And the program is about the regional ethnic communities. So even though we have this Hungarian room, right, Anna may walk into the Hungarian room as a Hungarian and say, well, this doesn't represent me, or this oddly represents me, or, why? Right. But I think the important thing is it's what the regional ethnic communities sort of came together, oftentimes in compromise, to represent them. Anna, do you want to say something to that?
Yeah, no, I have recently been in the Hungarian room. It's a fabulous classroom, and I think it represents, all Hungarians, past and present. It definitely draws on Hungarian historical and cultural traditions, and has beautiful stained glass windows that celebrate the sort of great people from Hungarian history, those people that whose contributions to Hungarianness and Hungarian history and Hungarian culture are completely eternal. So I think it does completely represent Hungarians from Hungary as well as Hungarian Americans. Yeah,
Thank you for that endorsement.
absolutely.
Yeah. And so, like, I'll give an example, but Anna, she gave a talk about genealogy research in the Hungarian room this
Okay.
fall. And so that was a wonderful way to use the space, but also amplify kind of the mission of the program. And then the book launch, the Nationality Rooms and Intercultural
Cool.
Exchange programs sponsored or helped to organize the American book launch for Hungarian Roots, American Dreams. And that was really meaningful, I think, and a perfect kind of connection between the mission of the program, but also this local to global connection, because truly this book has an international reach. There were
Sure.
people who participated from not just Hungary, but around the world, I think from the UK and maybe Australia. And so I've come to a much more comfortable space with the program in that, as we were talking about before, there is the fabric of the Hungarian American community and other communities, Polish American community. I don't want to use the word unraveling, but it is changing. And
Sure.
so, I think the nationality and heritage rooms can offer an opportunity for people to reflect on that cultural history,
Mhm.
and also to explore it, in maybe more critical ways going forward. And I think just to bring people together around really beautiful, interesting spaces. They're used every day as classrooms. So,
Great.
from 8:30 to 8 o'clock, Monday through Friday during the semesters, you really can't get into the rooms mostly because they're in full use as classrooms. And then
So
they're used.
essentially, what you're saying is somebody could be taking a psychology 101 class at the
Mhm,
University of Pittsburgh, and they might be in the Hungarian room or the Polish
mhm,
room or one of
mhm.
the other 30 rooms that you said
Yeah.
are there.
Yeah. And it's
What an
never,
amazing adventure.
I mean, it is. And I think, I know for myself as an undergraduate, I would sneak into, and it's not really sneaking in because they're
Yeah.
open for the students to use, but I was taking Russian literature and I used to love to sit in the Norwegian room, which is just this very beautiful kind of, it's meant to be a typical traditional home and just sit in there and read my Russian literature books, and
Nice.
it's just fair. It's very atmospheric. And I think I hope it sort of, brings questions to students' minds about, and it's amazing how much there's really a shared stewardship to these spaces. We have very little vandalism
That's
right
great.
now. So you talk about the New Brunswick Festival, the first Sunday or the first weekend in June. We have usually every first Sunday in December a holiday open house. So all of the rooms are open so the public can come in. And then in the commons of the Cathedral of Learning, which is just this big, beautiful kind of space, the committees will set up tables where they're selling food and they're selling
Oh,
cultural items. And so, the rooms are decorated. They are decorated usually the second weekend in November, all the way through mid-January, and there are beautiful decorations in the space. And we never have people taking things like taking ornaments off of trees and I just think that's wonderful that there is a shared appreciation, shared stewardship, for the students and the faculty and staff of the university for the spaces.
there's so many things I want to ask you about this. I'm so looking forward to visiting one day,
Yes.
and I'll definitely visit during that time so that I could also see it decorated around the
Yeah.
holidays and that experience. But what I really loved what you were telling me about this Cathedral of Learning, the fact that it's really maintained its original purpose from the 100 years that it's been around and its original purpose with the regional, cultures. But I love the fact that it's also moved forward in a global sense with
Mhm.
including other programs, where students can study abroad or, experience, additional cultures that don't necessarily represent a room. So I feel like it has that welcoming of all cultures and the fact that you even have new rooms, like you have a Philippine room. So it's maintaining, but yet it's also moving forward.
Yes.
and maintaining that connection, which I feel like is admirable because
Yeah.
sometimes you don't have both.
Yeah.
Usually there's like, oh, this is what we are, this is our culture, and no one else is, but
Yeah.
I feel like it's a great experience. So
Yeah.
if
And I think
anybody's looking to go to the University of Pittsburgh, this is a good reason to
I
apply to the
invite you
college.
and we'll give you a special tour. But no, I think that's a great way of putting it, Christine. And that's part of our work moving forward with the program is how do we imagine representation of communities that exist in Pittsburgh now, but maybe
Yeah.
won't be represented by a room. And so there's a lot of interesting conversations and possibilities. And, for example, there's a Latin American Cultural Center just a few streets up. And so we invited them to the holiday open house this year.
Right.
We don't have any rooms that represent Latin American cultures or Spanish language cultures. Nevertheless, it was really nice to have them. And we have like a shared admission kind of set up. And so, even if we're not a place of representing those communities, we can be a conduit. We can have people understand the welcome that the rooms are to represent, that you are welcome.
Right. Well, I think that's
Yeah.
that's fantastic that you have that openness and just that forward moving idea to do that, because I think that's important to always continue to be inclusive of
Yeah.
additional cultures that are in the regions.
Yeah.
All those change over the decades and over the centuries. So
I just wanted to
yeah.
add from the sort of the student experience, what a great impact these nationality rooms have, I think, just on the average student. I was there on a tour of the nationality rooms a couple of weeks ago because my daughter was here visiting me, and we went on a tour. And as we walked into the Norwegian room, I thought, it's like, oh yes, I had the research methods class with Robert De Kaiser in this class.
Oh,
The whole experience came back, and even though I did not know very much about the Norwegian room, I had this very, very strongly imprinted in my memories somewhere, and then walking into the classroom brought back memories of the class. And yeah, I mean, it's just such a nice additional experience at Pitt. That sometimes, if you're lucky, you're gonna have a one class or
mhm.
classes in these classrooms, which are absolutely gorgeously decorated and are very beautiful and very special.
It's great to have people also speak of it. I know you're the director there, but when you hear other people talking about their lovely experiences, it's great press for the Cathedral of Learning, which is amazing. You've told us all about your dad and your professional connection that you maintain, and had a little quote, but the question I'm going to ask you is going to be a little bit different. You said in your contribution of your story in Hungarian Roots and American Dreams, you said, when our father died, my siblings and I not only became orphans, we lost a connection with our Hungarian ancestry and the daily interactions with its culture and language that defined our lives. And the question I was originally going to ask you was to, tell me about how this lifelong connection was the motivating factor for the trajectory of your life, both personally and professionally. And I feel like you've answered that already. So I'm going to ask a question. How do you feel that growing up with the influence of your parents and the Hungarian community and your current position and all of your professional experiences working at the embassy and spending time in Hungary, where do you feel like your life is going and how you're going to continue maintaining that, not just for yourself, but for, your kids and, your future family?
That's a wonderful question. So I think I alluded to this before, but I do understand now the importance of community. And you used a word, Christine, that is really driven my work in international education, and I've worked in all different facets of international education, but inclusive. I want to be a person both in my professional life, but also my personal life to be really to practice inclusivity and to recognize, and I believe this so very deeply, to recognize that each of us has value that we bring, and how we connect with others is important and meaningful. And, I was thinking as we were talking throughout this that, like, why are the churches and why are the communities? For a long time, I had the script that, oh, it's because we're so busy. We're two income families, both working, and we're so busy. But, I don't really think that's such a good excuse anymore because I also know for myself personally, I can waste my time in ways that are not productive, you know?
Of
So,
course. I think we
you
all
know,
know that we can do that. Yeah.
yeah, and so I think personally, and I think then extending it to my family, I really would like to focus on the kind of social connections across difference, if you will, that can really just make us all better people, like, just make the
Yeah.
world a better place. And so I'm just figuring that out for myself personally, like in terms of where it is that I end up living, how it is that I engage in community, and how I really foster those connections. And so I think that's important to me. And I sort of work with students through the scholarships, but not directly. But we also have this cadre of student tour guides called Quo Vadis. And
Okay.
so it's through that kind of not direct work, but indirect work that I want them to understand the value of inclusion and the value of connection. I think those are really the two things that I can say. And I believe the work that I do with the nationality rooms and intercultural exchange programs, it really fosters that. And I know because like the students come
Sure.
back from these experiences and, they're doing like unbelievable things around the world, and are growing themselves as individuals. And so if it's that, or if it's through the Quo Vadis guides, leading tours, appreciating these beautiful spaces, but also connecting all of
Right.
the public who comes in. So I think that's really where I am, and especially for my family, that the kind of social isolation that I believe is a bit of a problem for us in
Yeah.
this
I think
day
it's
and age.
prevalent across the US with many cultures as well. So I don't
Yeah.
think you're alone in that. It's definitely something that I think about often too with my family and how I just became a grandmother. So
Congratulations.
thank you.
That's so
So,
good.
these are conversations that I have with my kids who are 29 and 23. What do you want your kids' lives to look like? Because clearly I, knock on wood, I will be an active part of their lives, but how are you going to shape their lives? What do you feel like that's going on in the world, with being distracted and like say not having a garden or social places, the availability of screens, those are things you have to think about now. I do feel this shift in a positive direction with people that are in my family, people that I'm close with, people on the internet that I don't know, but I watch their videos. You see it just like with the garden. So I'm hoping that going forward, because I do have to say, I was thinking as we were all talking about the things that we're doing, we have similar visions of maintaining connections, but just in different ways, you
Yeah.
know? So I feel like we're all in this together. And I think that's exciting. I think we definitely have to keep that positive motion going forward with inclusivity and even just within our own culture, with moving forward and making people continue to feel accepted,
Yeah.
no matter how Hungarian they are. So, I feel like most people are accepting. I've made a lot of friends, and I think we just need to keep moving forward and keep bringing people back into the fold because I feel like there's a need for that. And I think there's a longing for that by people who really want to be reconnected. So I think all three of us are working the same job to do that, just in different ways. So the three of us need to keep connecting to make sure that that happens.
Yeah. I just wanted to add that I mean, when I first arrived in the US for graduate school in 1991, I looked around and in these American Hungarian communities, and I mean, they seemed very interesting and exciting to me, but also a little bit foreign. And
Oh,
then over the
yeah,
years, I mean, they were not
sure,
Hungarian in exactly the same way
sure.
as I experienced Hungarian as back in Hungary. And this has been one of the things in which I think I grew quite a bit over the years, very quickly back in the 90s, and I'm still growing in this, I think, in appreciating, how many different ways there are of being Hungarian, and it's not just one way, the Hungary way that is possible, but everyone basically who has a Hungarian connection, probably represents a slightly different way than the other person of being Hungarian, and that I, as a Hungarian from Hungary, the only thing that I should be doing and I can be doing is appreciating this and reaffirming people in their Hungarianness, because it's a mistake that many Hungarians from Hungary make, that to believe that there is only one way to be Hungarian.
I
And
don't think anyone could have said that more perfectly than you have said that right now, because again, a topic for a different episode. However, I feel like that's definitely something that, Kati, I'm sure you've experienced as well. Sometimes people may not appreciate the Americanness of being Hungarian in the US, but that's why we need to be more inclusive. But Anna, I feel like you hit the nail on the head, as they say in the United States. You really did. And I feel like you definitely absorbed it and learned to appreciate that there is more than one way to be Hungarian. And we could appreciate each person's perspective regarding that, because there's so much pride. We have so much pride in our heritage. And throughout the world, the diaspora is just really longing to be connected to this amazing country.
In Hungary, a lot of people, or actually most people, believe that you can only be Hungarian if you speak Hungarian. And this is actually a sociologically important fact about Eastern Europe, that if you ask people in Eastern Europe, can you be of nationality X without speaking language X, and you can substitute any nationality or ethnicity and the language in that sentence, people would believe no. And something like 97% of East Europeans would answer no to that question. But that's the East European view, and
it's a valuable opinion. It's not that they're allowed to feel that way.
So, absolutely. But being in, spending years in the United States taught me that that is absolutely not the only way to go. And some of the American Hungarians with whom I've had, multiple discussions and friendships over the years, Kati being one of them, and probably the most important one, taught me that you don't need to necessarily be completely fluent in Hungarian or even speak Hungarian at all to be Hungarian at heart, and to appreciate Hungarianness, and for it to be important for you.
Again, well said. I feel like these are definitely topics that many communities, with all the people that I've spoken to through this podcast effort around the world, feel all the same feelings that you've explained, as far as feeling connected, not feeling connected, the longing for connection, and maybe why they're not feeling as included. But there are sociological reasons behind all of those emotions. So they're valid, because everybody's allowed to feel what they want to feel. But as we move forward in this global society, hopefully we can foster a greater connection as we move forward with the generations. And I think that's really what all three of us are trying to do here.
No, I just thank you both, Christine and Anna, very much. It's fun to talk about these things. And I thank you both for what you're doing in terms of helping to create a world that allows people to share about their stories. And through that, just developing a better understanding of one another. And of course, near and dear to our collective hearts is the Hungarianness of it all. So,
of course. Thank you so much for being here today. I would love to encourage people to not only purchase their own copy of American Roots and Hungarian Dreams, which I will leave that information in the show notes, but also to take a trip out to Pittsburgh to visit the nationality rooms. I'm sure that if you reached out, Kati Csoman would definitely help organize a little tour for you or give you some recommendations about that. And if you're looking for information about the nationality rooms international exchange program, did I say that properly?
Nationality rooms and intercultural exchange programs.
Okay, thank you for correcting me. So yes, I'll leave information for that in the show notes as well. Kati, it was so lovely to meet you here on the podcast. I feel like we're going to be fast friends. I hope that I will see you. If not before, definitely at the Hungarian Festival on the first Saturday of June. I feel like we have so much more to talk about. Thank you for sharing about your father's and your mother's experience and their involvement, and how that led to your professional career. And Anna, of course, thank you so much for being my co-host in this series of episodes where we are sharing Hungarian heritage together. Thanks so much, Kati and Anna, for being here today, and I look forward to more connections that we make not only with each other, but with everyone else. Thanks for joining me today and my co-host, Dr. Anna Fenyvesi, for part 2 of the Csoman Family Legacy, along with our guest, Kati Csoman, on this episode of the Hungarian Heritage Podcast. If you haven't listened to part 1, you should definitely go back and listen to hear all about Kati's father's emigration to the U.S. and how he tirelessly contributed to the American Hungarian communities throughout his life. You will see how he was an inspiration to many, and of course, his daughter, Kati. If you're interested in purchasing a copy of Hungarian Roots and American Dreams, either in English or in Hungarian, or if you're interested in joining the Facebook group, you will find that information in the show notes, as well as how you can get in contact with Dr. Anna Fenyvesi. If you're interested in getting in contact with Kati Csoman, please send us an email and we will forward that information with Kati's permission. If you have feedback or questions about this episode, or you would like to connect with me at the podcast, you will also find that information in the show notes. If you've enjoyed this episode and you're interested in learning more about this Hungarian heritage community, please don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to hear from you. Our theme music is Hungarian Dance by Pony Music, used with special license from Envato Market. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, make sure you stay Hungarian Heritage Strong. Sziasztok!